Hello, everyone. So content and thematic analysis is today's video. One of the 6 research methods that you need to know, as you can see on the screen just here. So these are all methods in which you may be asked about. You may be asked to design one of these as part of the 12 markers at the end of research methods in paper 2. And as you can see just down the bottom, we've got content analysis. Now there's no thematic analysis until much later, actually. So thematic analysis comes up as part of content analysis, popping up again randomly. I don't know why content analysis is in there twice. But when we're talking about either content or either thematic analysis, we are talking about ways that you interpret and analyze and measure qualitative data. So you probably, at this point, if you're watching this video, have already looked at a lot of how you analyze quantitative data, descriptive statistics, inferential statistics, Mann-Whitney's, chi-squared, scientists. We look at so much at how you analyze numerical quantitative data. But we don't really look at that much until today is how to look at qualitative data. So on the right of the screen just here, I've got a transcript of an interview of some kind. So a transcript is, as you can see just up the top just there, a verbatim, so word for word, a verbatim outlining of what people have said before. And if I were to use it, I can't use a stats test here. I cannot use a statistical test or a mean or anything like that. I can't use that here. So I'm going to use either content or thematic analysis. Now, we are going to start off looking at content analysis before we go into thematic analysis. So content, as I said, content and thematic analysis are techniques employed to analyze qualitative data, descriptive, wordy data. Now, I've got to admit, I've never done a full content analysis before. I've done a thematic analysis, which is way harder. I've done 2 of those in my life, and they've taken me about 15 years to do, I swear. But content analysis is basically quantifying qualitative data, right? So it is turning qualitative data into quantitative data. And we do that via using a coding scheme, a tally chart, if you will. So let me give you some examples before we go into this. So imagine I want to do research on what men and women are after in relationships, right? Be it heterosexual, bisexual, homosexual, whatever, right? Say I want to look at that, and I'm going to look at what they write in their Tinder profiles. So I can't use a stats test there because they're not really going to give me any numbers. So what I have to do is I have to look at, I used to use a content or thematic analysis. How many times female stereotypes appear in adverts, for example? So I've got a couple of Tinder profiles just here. I've got what Tom is saying about Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. He's looking for new friends who want to go hiking. So that's a keyword. Get drinks, other fun stuff. He's a journalist who writes about technology and culture. Now, what I would do is, I would make a note of those words. I've got a couple of others just here. These are random ones that I've just found. Feel free to pause because that top left one is quite funny, actually. And so is the bottom left one. And so is the one on the right. But these are examples of Tinder profiles that I would... Look, there's no numbers there. There's no statistics that I could use, for example. I mean, maybe I would look at the mean of how old they are, but that's not really great research. I want to look at what sort of thing are they actually saying, for example. So there's a number of ways you can do it, right? Before we go into this. Now, this is all your AO1, by the way. There are a number of things that you can quantify in terms of qualitative data. You might want to quantify the amount of words that come up, for example. That's the most common one, right? You might want to see if there's a theme, a character, time and space. But essentially, these are things that you can quantify. So I'd make a note of these for your AO1. It's relatively straightforward. But let me show you something else. I actually have a transcript that I've done earlier. These are interviews I did with 3 teachers around the college as part of my master's. I had to record them. I had to record the interviews, and then I had to put my headphones on and I had to type all of this up. It was labor intensive to say the least. But as you go through, you'll notice there's not really any statistics in there. So I can't use Mann Whitney, Wilcox, and chi-squared, unrelated t-tests, Spearman's, Pearson's, for example. So what I would do is I would read through this several times, right? So I'd say this is me, and this is Jody, one of the health and social care subject lead. So it's me saying, what are your opinions on the importance of students completing this kind of 4.5 hours or 9 hours of pre-work? And then Jody's then saying, I think it's really hard to judge whether they've actually taken the time on it, because for some students it would take them far less than 4.5 hours, whereas for others it would take them 4.5 hours and maybe even more than that, and so on and so forth, right? So I would have to go through this, and for content analysis, please note this down. You have to experience what's called immersion of data, where you immerse yourself in the data by reading it several times. I had to read this 14-page document several times. This is Hannah from biology. Look at some of the depth of her answers, for example, really detailed. Now, what I'm doing is I'm just making a note of something that keeps coming up. Pre-work, for example, there. Pre-work, for example, just there. Pre-work, for example, right there. And then so I read this several times, and then what I do is I create a coding scheme of everything that has come up in that thing. So this is one that I did before, and based on what you've just read, look at how many times pre-work comes up. Look at how many times student comes up. The term non-completion comes up. So content analysis used these coding schemes to turn what was qualitative data into quantitative data. Now, once you have that, the researchers would then write up about what they found, right? What they found. So what you have here is a numerical way of finding out what a bunch of words say. And remember, content analysis is basically turning qualitative data into quantitative data. Now, where would you see something like this? So here is a question that has come up before about content analysis, how you would structure it. And I'll read the stem out because it's quite important to do that. The psychologist was interested in finding out whether dream themes differed between males and females, particularly in terms of social interaction. She decided to conduct a pilot study with 20 undergraduate students volunteering for the study. And for a 6-week period, the students were interviewed at 9 a.m. each morning when they arrived at university. Interviewers, who did not know the purpose of the study, carried out and recorded the dream interviews. A couple of questions later, you get this come up. Another researcher who did not know the purpose of the study carried out a content analysis of the interview data. And the question for 4 marks is explain how this content analysis could have been conducted. So what you have to do for this question is you have to outline how you would turn that qualitative data into quantitative data. Now, might be worth having a think about how you would do this, but the answers are right here. And if you have a look, you get awarded 1 mark. So the first thing you need to do is to identify and devise the categories. What we mean about this is this bit here. You read the data, you immerse yourself in the data, and then you come up with these categories. That is 1 mark. The second thing is you want to give an example from what might come up in the dream analysis, for example. Fine. You then have to work through the transcription, repeatedly listening to segments of the recording before finally tallying up how many times each of those come up. Now, you can do immersion of data before or after. It makes sense to do it before, but that is how you would do it. Can we please make a note? And it's quite important, actually. That is how you devise a content analysis. That is how you actually do one. So that's probably the easiest question you're going to get. The hardest question was actually the next question for this, was basically how can you ensure reliability of the content analysis? Here's the problem. Have a look at this top one just here. Identify or devise important themes. If I read the interviews and come up with what I think comes up quite a lot, if you read the same thing, would you come up with the same categories? Probably not. And therefore, my content analysis is incredibly different to your content analysis, which begs the question, is it reliable? Now, how could you explain how the reliability of the content analysis could be assessed? Two ways: test, retest reliability, and inter-rater reliability. Now, I'm not going to go through these, but this question could come up, and this question generally does not end well for most students. So, because it mixes a little bit of reliability, which is complex, in with content analysis, which is really quite complex for students as it is. So you might want to make a note of how you would do that through either test, retest, or inter-rater reliability. Now, in terms of strengths, and so that's what content analysis is. In terms of strengths, first thing, it's easy. It's easy. All you need to do is be able to read, which I'm pretty sure most of you will be fine with. Not all of you, but I'm pretty sure most of you would be fine. Look at this. You don't even have to recruit participants for them. All you need is access to a transcript of some kind. I've got the Sky News app. I've got the Sky News article up here. I could click on any one of these articles, right? And that's a bit depressing. About the boy who was killed by mold. There's flooding, which is quite bad. Ukraine, that's not really great, to be honest. Desperate 999 call hours before murder. So, a bit depressing, really. But I could click on any one of these, right? Why do we still have hosepipe bans? And I don't even need a participant for this. I could do a content analysis on this. And if we're looking at this article, I'm guessing water's going to come up quite a lot, right? I'm guessing water's going to come up quite a lot. So water comes up 31 times. There you go. You see it just up there. So therefore, I would definitely tally that. So the great thing about these is that they're easy to use. You don't need participants, and they don't really take that long either, right? Now, the great thing about it is that you can use it in conjunction with other methods. So you use it as part of an observation, self-report, experiment. Content analysis can be used with other research methods really, really well. But the weaknesses, obviously, sorry, I'm wearing this snood because it's freezing here. I can actually see my breath. But it tells us what we found. It doesn't tell us why we found it. For example, if I go back to this one just here about pre-work and students, it tells us what we found. It tells us that people talked about non-completion and pre-work, but it doesn't tell us why people talked about it. And obviously, the most important question for psychology is why something happened. Content analysis does not answer that question. So, not great, really. Flawed results. Results may not be able to be applied or reflective of society. For example, negative events get more coverage, but it's not necessarily reflective. We live in a pretty functional recovery. Functional recovery. We live in a pretty functional society. Yet, if I click on the news, everything is depressing. Everything is depressing. Cost of living, war, death, everything else. Doctor Who. There's loads of depressing things out there. Excuse me. So, what we decide to do a content analysis on may skew our opinion about what is happening in society. It's quite an advanced point, really. But obviously, you've then got the issue of low reliability. If I do a content analysis on an interview, and then you do a content analysis on an interview, they're going to be very inconsistent because there's more than an element of subjectivity about this. So content analyses are incredibly subjective. Now, content analysis is one thing. It's one way to assess qualitative data. The other way is the much harder thematic analysis. Thematic analysis is tough. I've done 2 of them in my life at the time of recording. One at uni, one for my master's, also at uni. They are labor intensive, to say the least. They are tough to do, and you have to really like post-its. You have to really like post-its. Now, a thematic analysis is much, much more rigorous than a content analysis. What you do is the same sort of thing. You read through the, I'm going to explain it generally before I go into it. You read through the transcript several times, and any moderately key word you will put on a post-it and stick it on a table or like a piece of paper or like a big piece of paper, whatever. As you go through all of these codes, what they're called, the things you write on a post-it are called code, you then have to start putting the codes that are quite similar in piles together, for example, and start developing themes. So after a while, if you do this time and time again and keep going around, you will reduce your piece of work, your transcript, down to 6 or 7 major themes that come up, all of which have tens or sometimes even hundreds of codes in. So it's done by identifying trends in the data and slowly addressing these trends as you get through the data set. And it involves analyzing every piece of word, every word in a qualitative analysis. So for example, and change them into themes. If I'm looking at this one, where's that hose pipe band one? So what I would do for this one, if you want to be really rigorous, start at the article, and then you would type heavy onto a post-it, put it on the table. Rain on a post-it on the table. Throughout on a post-it, put it on the table. November on a table, for example. And then eventually what you're going to do is you're going to start putting things together, right? So you'd write south on a post-it, east on a post-it, south on a post-it, west on a post-it, Thames on a post-it, Yorkshire on a post-it. And eventually what's going to happen is you're going to end up putting them in a mini theme under the theme name of locations. So southeast, southwest, Thames, Yorkshire, they would go into locations. And then what you're doing is, southern, Welsh, what else? Southeast again. It comes up quite a lot. Southeast again, southwest, Yorkshire, Cornwall. There you go, Cornwall. Now, what you're doing, eventually, you're going to put all of these post-its in a pile, and you're going to name that pile location. But that mini theme may come under like another big theme, for example. So it's complex. I don't think I'm explaining it very well. So let me try to go about it in a different way. Right? There are 6 stages that you need to know. Right? There are 6 general phases to a thematic analysis, and this would go into your AO1. The first stage is familiarization with the data. I've already told you about this. Data immersion. It involves intensely reading the data, becoming immersed in the data time and time again. Now, for my interview transcript, I had to do that. I had to do that. You then code. So the first thing you do is you generate individual codes that identify features of the data important to answering the research question. Basically, you write down every word on separate pieces of paper. Fine. Then what you do is you start going through and examining the codes and labels and determining if there are themes within the data set. So for example, I did a content analysis on this. I wrote pretty much every key word on a post-it. And at the Cafe Nero in Whiteley, I arranged 5 tables around me, and I had hundreds of post-its on it. I got some really weird looks, and I was there for hours. I think it was something like 5 hours or something in the end, just sticking post-its randomly on each other. Like, hello, I'll have a cup of tea, please. Like sticking post-its randomly on each other. And eventually, what I did, and I will show you this, just because it's probably quite useful. If I type in my master's dissertation, get that up and ready whilst I finish the rest of this. So I'll get that ready in a second. So what you also do is you're searching for themes. You then review the themes, so checking the potential themes against the data. You might want to refine them, for example, split them. Some themes you will throw away because you'll say, yes, that was a theme, but it's not important to what I was after. You then name the themes, you name them, and then eventually, and this is the really hard part, you then have to write it all up. What are the codes in your themes? Why did that come along? And it's really, really detailed. Now, a bit of a heads up, your dissertation in year 3 of uni will be at least 12,000 words. It's quite difficult to write a lot of those words if you're doing statistics. But if you were doing a qualitative analysis, like a content or thematic analysis, you're going to come across this. Now, this is my rough dissertation for my master's degree that I handed in a few years ago. Introduction, fine. We don't really care about that right now. This is the write-up of my thematic analysis, right? This is the write-up when we get to, where is it? And we get to data analysis. So I'll read out the first bit. After 2 waves of shifting and reorganizing proposed themes, 7 clear themes emerged from the thematic analysis. Themes were of varied size but encompassed the main parts and directions of the teacher interviews, and the themes that emerged were this: subject approach, consequence, policy, skills and resources, student profile, administrative burdens, and miscellaneous. Those were the 7 key themes. Then what I had to do, if you have a look at this first one, subject approach, I named that, by the way. Like, nobody actually said the word subject approach, but I looked at all of my mini themes and I thought, what is one way to sum all of them up? Subject approach. And then this is how much you have to write. This is for one theme, by the way. This is one theme just here, starts here. By far the most common theme to emerge and goes down, right? You're still writing. All of this is about one theme, right? No stats, still writing. Maybe quoting quite a bit. Quoting. Still going. There you go. That's one theme. And you have to do that for all of your themes. You may get quite cheeky and may take an entire quote from people, but essentially that is how you do a thematic analysis. The difference between content and thematic analysis just turns qualitative data into quantitative data. That's all it does. Thematic analysis is much more rigorous, much harder work, involves a lot more. It does tend to be subjective, of course, like the content analysis. It is incredibly labor intensive. It takes a long time. But they're pretty much the only evaluations that I could come up with off the top of my head. There is quite a lot to this, by the way, so can we make sure we are covering this? Content and thematic analysis is a question that most people would not do well on. So if you can do well on it, that would be grand. But I hope, as always, this video was useful.